asking the right people and keeping your vision in focus every day. This is the Brian Covey Show.
Hey, so what's happening, guys? Happy Thursday. Super excited to be back on the show and going live with you guys again. So for those of you that follow along with the Brian Covey Show, you know we've got some big news coming out with the book is launching March 1st, Conversations with Covey. And there's been amazing guests like today's guest that I'm about to introduce that you guys know we are always talking about learning and growing. How do we become our best selves? And how do we contribute and make that collective impact in the world? So as I look for guests, I came across Hala and I think connected on LinkedIn originally. And I looked at what she was doing with her Young and Profiting podcast. She'd been working at Disney and HP and all these places before, had some radio background, which I thought was really cool and some overlap with some things I've done. But then I just noticed somebody that had built up her confidence and was leaning into her gifts. And she was contributing back at a much larger scale. I think we had some connections, some people that we both knew, like Heather. And I saw some of the guests you brought on. And I will tell you, I was very impressed. I started doing my homework with you. I was super excited because it looks like, at least as I started looking at things, you have really started to accelerate in a short period of time where most people just sit on the sideline and they talk about it, they think about it, but they don't take action. So Hala, thank you for joining. And I can't wait to unpack your story and all of the things that you're up to.
Yeah, thank you so much, Brian. I'm super excited for this session. I know that you are such a great live host. You're well known for your LinkedIn Lives, so very excited to be on the show.
We bring the energy, and that's what I tell everybody is your energy is everything when you show up. And as I was looking at some of your posts, some of the things that stuck out to me is, and I know you were sharing with me before we went on, is you started to branch out into marketing, and you've really found a way that you're balancing not only professional sides of things, but you've got the marketing side of your story comes through and who you are, which I think creates a connection with people.
Yeah.
I also love, you've brought on some incredible guests, but let's start with you. And I'd love for people just kind of unpack a little bit of your journey over the last several years, because leaving radio, going back to school, you got these cool jobs that from the outside looking at Disney or HP, but then you kind of went and you can tell you pursued your passion and that started to grow.
Yeah. Cool. So I'll try to give you like I have a very complex story with lots of ups and downs, and we could literally spend 2 hours on my crazy story, but I'll try to give you like the 5-minute version. So when I was in college, I started my career in radio at Hot 97. I was an intern for the Angie Martinez show. So if you don't know what Hot 97 is, it's the #1 hip hop and R&B station in the world. When I was in college, it was a big deal to be at that station. It was like really well known in the tri-state area. And the Angie Martinez show, which I worked on, was the #1, talk show in America across all categories. So it was a big deal to work on that show. And so I actually ended up dropping out of school to take an opportunity at Hot 97 as an unpaid intern. In the radio world, you really have to pay your dues. A lot of the personalities that you hear on air have actually worked for free 5-10 years before they actually get a very low paying radio job. But at the time, I really wanted to work at Hot 97. It was my dream to be the next Angie Martinez, and they were really pruning me for that opportunity. So I was like the main intern, training all the other interns. I was like the only girl allowed in the studio area. I met every single celebrity, J-Lo, Beyonce, Chris Brown, Drake, you name it. I've met everyone, Kanye, like I've met everyone. And I used to run in those circles and go to parties with celebrities. And it was like a dream. I was not even 20 years old, like rocking it. Everybody was so impressed that I had this job. But in reality, I was working for free and making my money like hosting showcases and things at night. And like I said, I dropped out of school, and all my siblings at the time were like in med school. I have 3 siblings. They're all doctors. My dad was a doctor. And so my parents like hated that I dropped out of school and worked for free at a radio station. Like nobody understood what I was doing. Nobody realized like what a big deal it was for how young I was to be doing all of that. But nonetheless, I worked there for free and I gained a lot of experience in terms of audio editing, running a radio board, doing research, running contests. I used to record commercials for the station and like you would hear my voice on the radio. And so it was a really cool experience. And I ended up leaving the station when a paying job opened up. They didn't give it to me and I was very upset. And I got into like sort of a fallout with Angie Martinez. I sent a text to the guy who got the job who was unqualified. They wanted me to train him how to be the producer after I've been working for free for 3 years. And I said, like, I don't feel good today. I'm not going into work. If you want to learn, do it on your own. He was my friend. He showed the text to Angie Martinez and I got fired on the spot, which goes to show, you know, like loyalty, me working for free for 3 years, dropping out of school for this lady. And then she kind of cut me out. So I didn't just, you know, give up. I said, nobody's going to blackball me from this industry. Nobody's going to tell me that I'm not going to succeed here. You know, I love doing what I'm doing and I'm still going to be a leader. And so literally that weekend, and by the way, Angie told all the DJs who I was very close with, DJ Camilo, Funk Master Flex, these are huge names in the tri-state area. And that's how I used to make my money. She told me that they're not allowed to talk to me anymore. So nobody was answering my phone calls anymore. Everybody just pretended like I didn't exist. And a lot of the DJs were like, oh, don't worry, she does this. Like, just keep groveling to her and she'll let you back. Like, she's just trying to teach you a lesson. So just stay quiet and she'll let you back. But I was like, you know, young and not going to take crap. And so I was like, no, I'm going to start my own thing. I don't need Hot 97. I don't need Angie Martinez. And so I decided I was going to launch something called the Sorority of Hip Hop. Yeah. And I went back to school. In my senior year, my last year in college, I started something called strawberryblunt.com, the Sorority of Hip Hop. And I recruited 14 girls right off the bat. And I sent out Craigslist notices and like, you know, solicited on Twitter. I had a big following on Twitter at the time from Hot 97. And I ended up recruiting girls from VH1, from iHeart, from Def Jam, and like all these young girls in the industry who also felt like they didn't have a platform and that nobody was supporting them, male or female, in the industry. And we created something called the Sorority of Hip Hop. And within 3 months, we were like one of the most popular hip hop and entertainment news sites in the world. We got noticed by MTV. They shot a pilot with us. We didn't get it. It was a small pilot. But then, you know, we ended up having radio shows and hosting concerts and parties, and we got bigger and bigger. And then all of a sudden, the DJs who wouldn't give me a minimum wage job, right? I used to get them coffee, feed the meters. I was their BITCH, so to speak, right? And all of a sudden they were calling me to promote their parties. And I was side by side on the flyers with them, getting paid just as much as them. And instead of being their intern, I became their equals. And I totally just like one-upped everyone. And they were like Hala's blowing up. We need to get on this train. And then all of a sudden everybody started calling me again, including Angie Martinez. And then it was like, I never did any, like, you know, that whole thing never happened and everybody was cool. So just goes to show you creating your own lane is really powerful. And so I did that when I was young. So MTV reached out to us again. And this is not us pitching a reality TV show to them. This was MTV scouting us out. And so MTV reached out to me again. And this time it was like the VP, Tiffany Williams. She's like a big deal. And basically she was like, you're guaranteed a show. They signed us. I was the lead. We had 5 other girls on the show, and we had 50 girls in the overall Sorority of Hip Hop. And they got us a studio on Broadway. They filmed us all summer. We did our hair and makeup every day. We hosted a concert and did a dance. It was like a big deal. But then last minute, after they shot us, they shot me with my family, with my boyfriend at restaurants, shot us all summer. And then they pulled the plug last minute. And they basically destroyed my business because they picked girls who were like younger, who didn't deserve to be on the show. And then some of the main girls got upset and quit, and like everything was just a hot mess. And then they pulled the plug and we didn't get the show. And it was like everything was just disheveled. And I was like, okay, now MTV ruined my business after all this. Yeah. And we were just going to temporarily shut it down, but then we just never ended up starting it back up. So I then decided, my career in entertainment is over. You know, I gave this a shot. I worked at Hot 97 for 3 years. They didn't hire me. I started the Sorority of Hip Hop. We got so much traction. We almost got famous, and then MTV screwed us. And I was like, I'm done with the entertainment industry. I'm done doing all this work and getting nothing out of this. And I got really like kind of just closed myself off and said, I'm hanging up my hat. It's time to get a normal job. And I did that. I went and got an MBA. So I told all the girls, I'm sorry, but this is done. I went and got my MBA. I had terrible grades in my undergrad, so I had to convince my graduate director, told her about my story, and basically stalked her until she allowed me in the MBA program because I had such bad grades in undergrad because I, dropped out, worked at 187, was just not into school. I ended up getting a 4.0, graduating number one in my class. I was the only person to get a 4.0. So they were very happy that I got into the class. And then I ended up being the president of the MBA Alumni Association as well. So it was a great decision by them to let me in the program.
Wow.
But I got in there, and that's how I got my foot in the door at HP. They hired me as an MBA intern. And because I had a very entrepreneurial spirit, because I had basically learned on the internet, I came to that company and I had so much more knowledge than the other workers there. I was so much more tech savvy that I just my career skyrocketed. I got promoted 5 times in 5 years. I had every single job under the marketing department. I was president of their young employee network. I was the face of the young employees. I worked directly for the CMO and the CEO. So really highly visible at that company. And my last year at HP, it's a long story why I decided to start Young and Profiting Podcast. So I'm not going to go into that, but something happened where I didn't get a position that I wanted at HP that I highly deserved. And again, I decided to create my own lane, and I started Young and Profiting Podcast. And that was April of 2018. And I had just decided, you know what, I thought I would never get back on the mic, but I miss it. I've been spending a lot of my free time, basically working 2 jobs within HP. One side was me being the face of the young employees and leading all the young employees. One side was my day job. Something happened where they didn't give me a position that I deserved for leading, a cultural movement within the company. And then I decided, well, I have all this free time now. Yeah. I'm going to start my own thing. And now here I am, host of Young and Profiting Podcast. I went to Disney Streaming Services, ran their email and mobile marketing team. And I'm an entrepreneur now. I have a side hustle. I started a side hustle called Yap Media. I have 40 employees. I built that to a multi-6-figure side hustle while working at Disney full time. And just 2 weeks ago, I quit my job, and I'm a full-time entrepreneur now. So that's my whole big, long, complex story.
Man, but that kind of diverse experience, you can tell, even I was listening to you go through that, it's shaped and molded you. Every one of those lessons, and I tell people, as you go through life, you may get that job, you may not get that job. Things may work out this way, don't work out that way. I loved you shared a couple times about staying in your own lane. Where did your drive come from? Was that your parents? You're saying everybody was, doctors in your family, and I saw that. As you were there. You think that drive was a family thing, or did it come from somewhere else in your life? Because to get through all those kind of setbacks and things that
I know exactly what it was from. And it's such a great question. So it's really twofold. One is my father. So my father actually recently passed away in May, and he grew up in Palestine during war in poverty. His dad was a farmer, literally had no other job other than selling figs. All they ate was figs and bread. He had no running water, no electricity. My dad lived in a room with 6 people, right? And my father concentrated. He knew the only way he was going to get out of poverty was to rock it in school. And so he just studied nonstop. He was the smartest kid in his town. He ended up getting, a scholarship to a college in Egypt for med school. And he went to med school, and then he came to America. He became a surgeon. He became chief of surgery. He opened up a medical center. So he literally went from the bottom of the bottom in war in Palestine, no electricity, no water, and ended up bringing my whole family out of poverty. Even when he was so wealthy, he never had nice things. He would just donate all his money to my cousins in Palestine, put them all through school. So not only did he put all his kids through school, he put all my cousins in Palestine through school, which enabled them to kind of bring their families out of poverty. And of course, he helped them along the way. Nobody was poor once my dad was a doctor. The money difference in Palestine is very different than America. Yeah. So he's able to lift everybody out of poverty. And, he was just an amazing man. He was the most generous, kind, motivating. He always told me, since I was younger, Hala, you're a superstar, you're a superstar. You're just kind of built up my confidence. So that was really helpful. The other piece of that is that in high school, and in middle school, that's when 9/11 happened, right? And it was still a big deal, and I'm Arabic. And I remember being very popular on all the sports teams. All of my teachers loved me. I had so many friends. And then once 9/11 happened, it was nobody treated me the same. My teachers didn't treat me the same. They wouldn't even, I had the best voice in school and used to get solos every concert. Then they refused to put me in the talent show even. Like, I just got no opportunities like through high school, and literally everything I tried out for, I didn't get. And I was just blocked on everything. And I had like my core group of friends or whatever, but it was very different from when I was younger. And it was clear that it had to do with like people's perception about me being Arabic and what that meant. Yeah. And then once I got into college, it was like all that went away. I went to a college in Newark, New Jersey, which is a very diverse school. And then all of a sudden I became like the most popular girl in school and like, leading my sorority and captain of the cheerleading team and all these opportunities, leads in the play, and got this job at Hot 97. And then it was just totally different. And it was because I was rejected so many times in high school because nobody would give me any opportunities. And somehow I kept trying and trying. I would try out for the volleyball team and not get it. I would try out for cheerleading, but still go. And I got used to failure because it just became normal. Oh, nobody ever picks me. I always have to work 10 times as hard. Nobody ever chooses me by myself because I have a weird name. Like nobody wants to even give me a shot. I don't get freebies like a lot of other people. And so it just got built inside of me that I have to always work 10 times as hard. And then in college, all of a sudden it was like, oh, I can work 10 times as hard and get opportunities. And now everything's just skyrocketing. So that had a lot to do with it. I think a lot of it had to do with like, kind of getting shut out in high school, and then all of a sudden getting all this attention in college and everything kind of working my way while I still had that hard work ethic because nobody ever gave me anything easy. I think that has a lot to do with it.
I love that. It's almost, as I hear you talking about that, it's like that underdog mentality of there's people you're around in your life, and your dad changed the trajectory of your entire family and extended family. And then it's almost like that gift now or responsibility is with you, and you have that drive. Because when you are an underdog and you've been through things like that, like I played sports and you get cut from teams, you don't fit in certain groups or whatever it might be, you're almost always out to prove yourself, until you can find your lane, which you've done. And we were talking about this earlier. I'd love for you to unpack this because as you've started to have some success, you're starting to find your voice, find your lane, and the importance of mentors. And specifically, I was sharing my vantage point of female leaders coming up and entrepreneurs, and what that's like to find a mentor. And I think you've done that, but let's talk about what that looked like and how that's benefited you, because I think that is one for all of us. Mentors and people in our lives can help us accelerate and just bring out, that greatness inside of us.
Yeah. So actually my first mentor my first real mentor happened this year. Up until this year, I never had a mentor. Even women that were, in my life, somebody like Angie Martinez, I gave my all to this lady and she kind of really screwed me over and never mentored me. She used me, right? So there's a big difference. Like she used me. She did not mentor me. She didn't teach me anything other than people will use you and there's bad people in the world, right? So no offense to, Angie's not necessarily a bad person, but she used me and I would never, and like now that I'm like basically her age, when I was interning for her, I look at that and I'm like, wow, like I would never do that to the people that work for me. And anybody who interns for me gets, if you're good, after 3 months, you get hired. And I just can't believe that she did that to me. Like now that I'm older, I dislike her more because I understand what it is to be a woman and to be a respectable woman and to care about other people on your team. And I think like now I actually dislike her a lot more as I've grown up. So anyway, that's a whole nother story. So Heather Monahan is my mentor, and she is the first person that was ever really my mentor because she's the first person that has been where I want to go. Like one of the things that I admire to be is a speaker like she is, an executive coach like she is. Like she's done a lot of things that I want to do, and she's connected to a lot of people and can bring me a lot of opportunities. And so she was the first real mentor that I had. And it started off very like organically. She looked at my stuff like a lot of my guests do. She came on my podcast and I started doing marketing and she was like, wow, Hala, like your marketing is great. Who does your marketing? And I was like, oh, this is what I do for a living. I'm in corporate marketing. I have this team at this time, this team of volunteers, fans that just were obsessed with Young and Profiting podcast and volunteered to work on the show. And so I started a Slack group and had all these volunteers. And so I was like, yeah, you know what? I have a team of like 10 people. Yeah, they're all volunteers. This is our processes. I showed her how we do Headliner, and I showed her all our Canva stuff and all our different processes and schedules and the project management tools and automation, LinkedIn automation. I taught her all this stuff and she was just blown away. And she's like, Hala, what you have here is like the type of stuff that Gary Vee's team shows me when I have a call with them. And what you have here is a business and you could scale this out and you have to start this. And I want to be your first client. Like this is definitely your path, Hala. You've got to start this business. And so she really pushed me and she was like, I'm going to be your first client. I don't care what you say. And so I was like, okay, fine. I started off just doing videos for her. Okay, I'll take your podcast and I'll do video and micro content for you and I'll leverage my team and we'll see how it goes. And she paid me very little at first. And we did that. Then that went well. And then I scaled it to doing automation campaigns for her. And then I started doing her posts. And then one thing led to another. And I'm running all of her social media and all her podcast management. And now my team is getting paid and she's paying us well. And we're bringing her ROI by getting her big speaking engagements. And she's really happy. And then I just scaled it. You know, I landed the next big client and the next one and the next one. And all of a sudden I have 6 huge names under my company and we're running all their social media and all their podcast marketing and production. And it just worked out amazing. And that's really how my podcast blew up. I had a big brand on LinkedIn, but once I was actually able to like kind of reinvest in my company because I wasn't really monetizing off my podcast. It was just like a big brand. Right. And she enabled me to monetize in a great way. And then I just reinvested and everything just kind of blew up from there.
I love that because that's usually a couple things stick out. As one, there was a problem to be solved. You didn't even know the problem existed, but yet you had the tools and the resources to solve the problem. And then you realize from there, oh, this thing can be scaled. And a lot of times in business, you know, people, they have an idea, but it doesn't really solve a problem, right? It's just like a fun idea. Like, I think this would be fun to go do. And I love how you did that. And then it's also interconnected, right? Because you've got your podcast and you've got the area you want to be speaking and doing some social, and they're all interconnected. And I saw one of the articles that, and I'm a big believer in this stacking your talents and taking what you do well, but also building teams. And you talked about processes and scaling teams. I'd love to get your take on this part, because this is where I see a lot of people struggle, is moving beyond just themselves to building out a team and then actually being able to scale this to a business, right? So it's not like I got a couple clients, I'm doing it on the side. What worked for you as you started to really realize, okay, I need to scale this out? Because you have, what, 30 or 40 team members now, right? You're pretty large.
45 almost, 45. Yeah.
Crazy. That's incredible.
Well, that includes interns. So, and that brings me to how I do it. So typically we run an internship program. And so every quarter we have 10 to 15 interns. A lot of them, don't pan out, but let's say we recruit 10 to 15 interns. Half of them are social interns. Half of them are podcast, research production interns. And we run them through an internship program. It starts with a boot camp. Is very structured. They learn even if they don't make it as an intern, they get to learn something in the boot camp. If you do well in the boot camp, then you move on to be an intern. Then you have to pay your dues, because that's what you do in the broadcasting world. You've got to pay your dues. I mean, I interned for free for 3 years. So they work for free for 1 to 3 months, depending on how good they are. As soon as they start to provide value and I can assign them to a client, they get paid. So that's pretty much what we do and how we kind of internally train. I don't ever really recruit someone who hasn't been through our intern program. And that's how I make sure that I have people that are kind of ready to go and really trained up as I and then, I won't sign on a new client until I know that I have some interns that are ready to start getting paid and be assigned to clients. And then I sign them and then, get a new client. So that's kind of like our internal incubator to get new talent. And it works really well because we have such a well-known brand now that we're getting really good talent that want to intern for the podcast.
I love that. And a lot of people are out there hopefully listening, and we'll rewind that, because your strategy, I hear a lot of people say, well, I can't hire people or I can't do this. And it's like, you get creative and outside of the box interns, and there are plenty of creative people. And to your point, look, they're not all going to work out. That's life. That's business. That's how it works. But to find the right ones. And then I love how you also said is you're going to build them up. And before you take on a new client, you're going to make sure they can actually be cared for. So we're not bringing on clients and not be able to take care of them, because that doesn't work in reverse order.
Yeah, exactly. You need to have the resources and the capacity first. So it's I'm always getting that capacity ready, basically. Yeah. And I don't mean to talk about my employees like they're objects or something. They're all incredible, smart people. But reality is that you want highly trained. We've got very specific processes. We've got checklists, standard orders of procedures.
Right.
very organized, and so you need to know all of that and be ready and trained up. And even if they like, everyone gets a job if they do well and they want a job, because we're just, we have lots of demand. We're scaling really fast. So far, so good in terms of anybody who completes their internship gets a paid job, either part-time or full-time, whatever they want,
Yeah.
And so the thing is that you learn so much that these interns, even though they're working for free for up to 3 months, they're able to then go get a job. A lot of these people are recent graduates, even that weren't able to get a job, that they want to be in social media. They went to school for nursing, let's say. They don't want to be a nurse. It's 2020. And no one will give them a chance. It's like, I'm willing to give you a chance if you're smart, you want to work hard, you've got a good attitude. We've got 4 H's as our company culture motto. If you're happy, hungry, hands-on, and hardworking, you could join our team.
Love that.
And if they do, like, we just teach you everything. Teach you how to copyright, teach you how to graphic design, teach you how to post, different algorithm tricks, and really just give them the nuts and bolts to be a professional social media manager, or if they want to work on the podcast side, a professional producer or researcher.
Love as you go through that. And I got to say, so one of my favorite actors, I saw he was on there, Matthew McConaughey.
Yeah.
I got to ask, like, one, how that kind of came to fruition, but also anything that you took away, because I find those guests you leave, and sometimes you're surprised with the lesson they leave you. But how did that come to fruition? And then, what was your biggest takeaway talking with him?
Yeah, so Matthew McConaughey, what an honor to interview such a big name, and I had so many people come out of the woodwork. And it's funny because if you've been listening to this since the start, like, you heard my story, right? This didn't happen by accident. I worked hard, right? And Matthew McConaughey is not the first celebrity. I've interviewed Chris Brown. I've interviewed Fabulous, Soulja Boy, a different genre of people, but I've interviewed celebrities before. And so a lot of people, when they saw that, they were like, wow, like, how'd that happen? How much did you pay for that? How'd you pull that off? Like, that was the attitude that I was getting from a lot of people who don't know my story. And my response to them was, yeah, I've been working at this for 10 years. Like, I may have taken a 3-year break when I worked at HP and thought I was done with entertainment. But other than that, 7 years of hard work, 18-hour days, like, Young and Profiting Podcast is my 5th show. I had multiple online radio shows before this. I had, actual radio experience at Hot 97. So it was almost insulting, honestly, because I was like, damn, like, how hard I landed the cover of Podcast Magazine? How hard do I have to work to be recognized? You know what I mean? But again, it's being a woman, a young woman, a Palestinian woman. Nobody wants to recognize me, and that's okay. I'll keep fighting and clawing my way until, like, they have to acknowledge me. But anyway, Matthew McConaughey, how I got him. So we have different outreach strategies. So Hisham on my team leads guest outreach, and he sent Matthew McConaughey's team. I forgot how we got the contact, but I think it was just through, like, email scraping on LinkedIn or just through deduction. Like, it wasn't super fancy in terms of how we got the right contact information. So he emailed them a few times. They were interested, and then they kind of ghosted us. So they said, yeah, we'll definitely do it. And then they ghosted us. And that was like 3 months ago. Then I see Matthew McConaughey on a show. I'm not going to name the show, but he went on for like 10 minutes, and it's like a much smaller show than mine. And, I don't even think it's a real podcast. It was like a live show or something. And I was like, that's weird. He didn't want to come on my show. I get over 100,000 downloads a month. I'm on the cover of Podcast Magazine. I'm the #1 trending education app right now. Let me just shoot my shot. So I responded back to that thread, and I took screenshots of my stats to let them know that it was real. I took screenshots of my stats. I took screenshots of my rankings, and I said, hey, my name's Hala. I was just on the cover of Podcast Magazine. I'd really love to have Matthew on the show to talk about green lights. I get over 100,000 downloads. Here are some screenshots. Here's my podcast cover feature. And I'm just shooting my shot. I noticed that Matt has been on shows much smaller than mine, and I'd love to share his message. And that was it. They said, yeah. And I got him on for a whole hour. So it was just shooting my shot. It was random. Sometimes it takes that, like, little push. I was like, you know what? This doesn't make sense. He's definitely going on shows, and I don't know why they didn't pick me, but something must have been off. So let me give them the exact proof. And then how could they say no to that?
I love that, because sometimes we take that is rejection, when the reality is it could have hit in the inbox on the wrong day, or it might have been, I'm going to follow up on that. Good intentions never get followed up on, potentially. And I love your persistence in that, because for you and your team to have the processes and to go after what you want. And yeah, the people that don't know your story, of the people you had on in radio and that you've continued to work with, it's like, look, I've worked with the biggest A-list celebrities. This is going to be a good match. And this is a cool story. I love how you stayed with it too. And I saw, I mean, your rankings are there, and I love how you did that in a way, at least I interpret it this way, is you're not bragging or going, hey, look, like, why in the world are you not coming on my show? It's more of, hey guys, look, let me validate for you. If you have any intrepidation, any concerns, look, here's what we're doing. Here's the validation of what's happening in your hard work. To your point earlier of 7-10 years of putting in the reps and the time, you gotta be willing to ask for some of this, right? Like, you can't just sit on the sideline and hope great guests are just going to walk across your desk and go, yeah, I want on your show. You got to ask.
Yeah, you got to ask. And it's okay if somebody tells you no. Maybe they didn't have anything to promote, or they're working on a new book and super busy. Like, that happens all the time. So I'm never afraid to go back again and ask again. And, I'm always improving. There's many guests that, like, Elena Cardone is somebody that I wanted on my show for so long. And I've maybe asked her team 10 times. And just this time they said yes, but I keep asking, I'm like, hey, just want to follow up. Now I'm not just the 50th most popular podcast. I'm number one. Like, you know what I mean? And then they can't say no anymore. And they're like, wow, this girl like continually keeps improving. Like, we better jump on the bandwagon. Yeah. And it makes a good impression to keep improving and to not be annoyingly persistent. It's not like I would ask somebody 3 times in 1 month, but every quarter, like just checking in, here's what happened for me since you last said no, like, right? Yes. Is it good now? Like, am I good enough for you now? And I kind of do that.
I love that. So there's probably a lot of our listeners that are either just launching a podcast in their first few years of doing it. And I would love to get your insights on what advice would you give them if they're still kind of new into this, but they're wanting to take off. How to really start to scale and get those better guests, and whatever that level is for them right now, or their kind of targeted avatar person. What advice would you give them on how to start to accept that?
I think that's a great question. And my advice would be to start a community and to be a leader of your community. And when I say community, I mean a community of podcasters. Mm-hmm. So one of the things that I did before my podcast really got like hockey stick growth, and that was only 8 months ago or 6 months ago, when my podcast really went from 4,000 downloads a month to getting like 10,000 downloads in a day. Right. And so like totally different metrics now than I did 6 months ago. So podcast communities. I started a podcast community and I recruited like 50 podcasters. Some of them were a little bit bigger than me. Some of them were a little bit less popular than me, but everyone had a lot of potential. And everybody also had either a big platform community on LinkedIn or Instagram. Yeah. And so I strategically recruited this like podcaster group of 50 people. We had like a monthly mastermind call where we shared information. I got other like podcast apps to do demos and presentations, so it would be really useful for everyone. And then I got, in with like the different podcast apps, and then they would promote me because I was promoting them to these podcast influencers. And so it worked really well. But the benefit of that is you have like a support group, and in the information age, information is the number one most powerful tool that you can have, right? So if everybody knows something and is relatively successful, then they can teach you what worked for them, and you can teach them what worked for you, and all benefit. Instead of, taking 2 years, it might take you 3 months to figure all that out because you've got a community of people sharing information. So that's number one. Number two is like you could do things like review swaps with them. Everybody review each other's podcasts. Now everybody has 50 reviews extra, and that's boosts your ranking and makes you look more credible. So that's one thing. You guys can do guest swaps. So a lot of us went on each other's podcasts and promoted each other that way. When you're promoting your podcast, you want to be where the podcast listeners are. It's very hard to get them to go from social media to then listen to your podcast. Like, that's an uphill battle. But if you're already listening in a podcast app, the average listener has like 7 podcasts in rotation. And so if you're guesting on someone's show, the chances are they'll be a lot more likely to check out your show than them hearing about it on social media, right? So it's a more downstream method to actually get new listeners. So guesting on each other's shows. Something that I didn't do with them, but we had the idea, was to do commercial swaps. So coming up with a schedule where we each like kind of cross promote each other's podcasts. We ended up not doing that because all of a sudden my podcast now I'm like the most popular podcaster in the group. So it doesn't make sense for me to do podcast commercials or swaps because my downloads are so high, right? But at a certain time, it was equal and we were thinking about doing stuff like that. So having a community and being the leader in the community is a great way to kind of put your name in the space, to start getting more opportunities. You guys can introduce guests to each other. Like there's a million ways that you can collaborate. So as a podcaster, it's a very collaborative space. And I encourage you not to have a scarcity mindset, to have a mindset of abundance and prioritize collaboration over competition.
Man, so you just spoke some of the language. We talked about collective impact and we talk about collaboration over competition, which for athletes, it kind of goes against this dichotomy that's happening there. And I love, for those of you that are out there, I would rewind that back and take notes, because what you shared about building community and about just the review swap and about sharing information and creating that community, you can share ideas, because the reality is in a group of 50, people are going to figure things out before you do or have ideas that can help you, and not being afraid to join in those. And it will accelerate. I mean, that's what we've got, a few of those that I've joined into and I had no idea they existed. And now, to your point, I'm starting to realize, wow, this is really powerful. And I'm just kind of soaking in knowledge while building great.
And it's great to evolve it too. So Clubhouse came out, right? And that was, took everything by storm. And now all of us are hosting Clubhouse rooms together. And it's just like this evolving thing of supporting each other. And it's just absolutely amazing.
We're going to have you back on, because this has been a ton of content. I want to make sure we're able to digest this, but we'll have to talk about Clubhouse again, because I'm interested to see in a few months, because I've seen you on there active. There's been some incredible connections made. And to your point, there's some rooms, I don't hang out there a lot, but when I go, I do find some value in that collaboration and the amount of just ideas and energy that's shared. There's something happening there. So interesting.
Yeah,
cool.
For sure. It's amazing.
Let's tell everybody where they can find you on social. And then also, I love you talking about the marketing services earlier. I'm sure that's going to pique some people's interest. Let's tell them a little bit about how they can get connected, but then also how they can engage with you, as you're offering some value and also services that they might need to help their business.
Yeah. So you can find me on LinkedIn. You can search for my name. It's Hala Taha. You can't miss me on LinkedIn. On Instagram, it's at Yap with Hala. I'm just getting more into Instagram and really building my following there. I'm on Clubhouse, super active there at Hala Taha. I'm hosting live Yap events every other Tuesday, and also podcast office hours with some of my podcast expert friends every Wednesday at 4:30 p.m. So you guys can definitely check me out on Clubhouse. And then the last thing I'll say is listen to Young and Profiting Podcast. It's an amazing show. We interviewed people like Seth Godin, Mark Manson, Robert Greene, Matthew McConaughey. So really great stuff, all actionable advice. I do tons and tons of research. It's super quality content. I know that you guys, if you like Brian's show, you're going to love my show too. And Yap Media, really, we're a premier marketing and podcast agency for best-selling authors, celebrities, top podcasters. So if you're that type of person and you're interested in getting your social media and podcast totally done for you, you can reach out to me. And otherwise, if you're an up-and-coming podcaster, I'm really getting to be known as, a guru in this space. And I do podcast office hours on Clubhouse, like I said, every Wednesday at 4:30 p.m.
Love it. I love it. So we'll make sure to include those links in there, guys, so you can follow along, and we'll have some promotional stuff that we pull out of this. But Hala, this has been awesome. Like, I knew this was going to be a fun conversation, but I got to tell you, you exceeded all expectations in the value you're doing. I love your story. There's just a lot of connection points. So thank you for making time, because I know you're busy and all that, but your story, I really believe it's going to impact some people. And we're going to have you back on. There's more to unpack here.
Thank you so much, Brian. It was such a pleasure to be on here.
Awesome. Guys, well, this has been another edition of the Brian Covey Show. And I want to remind you, March 1st, we got our official launch date on Conversations with Covey. So the book is going to be coming out. Make sure you go on to the podcast and leave a review. So Hala talked about that earlier. We would welcome your reviews. Let me know any guests you found out there that would fit who we're trying to bring on, as we are all learning and growing together in this world. And make sure that you take action today to make an impact in the world beyond yourself. Share your gifts and talents, and let's make that collective impact together. So this has been another episode of the Brian Covey Show. We will see you on the next one. See you guys.